Awesome. Welcome to Real Talk. Divorce, life, and everything in between. With Lorraine Roberts, that's me, and Richard Morton, that's Richard. And we're glad you're here because today we're going to talk about something that shows up for all of us, and it's called pride. Pride is the voice that says, I've got this, even when you don't. You know, it's what makes you hold your head high after everything's fallen apart. But here's the kicker. Pride can stop you from asking for help and being real. So, from letting anyone see what's actually going on, you hide it. If you're going through divorce or you've been in a relationship that's messed with your heart and your head, you might know this all too well because pride is a mask that you wear. So, no one sees you struggling, no one sees the feelings that you've got going on. But what if the mask is doing more harm than good? So, in this episode, we're going to get real about it. We're going to talk about the difference between healthy pride and protective pride, and we'll show how it shows up, why we use it, and what it is really covering. And most importantly, we'll talk about how letting go of pride, even just that little bit, can be one of the most powerful things that we can ever do for ourselves. So if you're feeling exhausted from holding it all together, if you've been smiling while slowly crumbling on the inside, this episode is for you. So let's dive in. So, Richard, what is pride really?
We've been told, again, pride being something where you accomplishment of something, being proud of yourself to a point of, success and everything else. But because it's pumped at us in a sense of don't be too boastful. As you said, protective, I use the word deceptive sometimes because pride
Yeah.
can lean on that stage of arrogance, as we become entitled and sometimes we're put on a stage or, behavior. And yet we don't want anybody to see our weaknesses. So we stand being proud in the sense of like perhaps military, of yourself becomes a shield, another part of another layer or point of view of the imposter syndrome.
And that can be healthy
Mhm.
in a way because it
Absolutely.
protects us from other people attacking us,
Yeah.
but it can also be deceptive from getting people to help us when we need help.
Mhm.
So it's a double-edged sword. It's good and it's also bad. So we need to be very, very aware of where our own behavior is going and why we got so much pride.
Well, in families too, right? For being proud of maybe your station in life, who you're sort of related to, this sort of pride and arrogance, and then I always, we maybe some money you have our family money, generation of money, so there's pride there of who we are, so we don't let people know our problems. And my running joke is the bigger the house, the more skeletons in the closet sometimes because money money at the front door and pain at the back door, because well we don't let people know we're fine. But again, a lot of these relationships where when people have wealth, they don't have the depth of relationships. It's all about image. Let's put on the image. Let's put on the nice clothes when we go. Let's put on the nice clothes when we go to church and show our pride. But underneath, we have dysfunctions, because we're trying to put on a standard that we don't feel of at our side. And again, the pride hides who we really are. It doesn't allow us to have that sense of deep connection, one with ourselves because it's such
Mm.
a false shield, and two with the people we should be close to, like our partners or our children.
Mm.
We're running at a behavior level. We're not running at a level of connection.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
and so the children are not, we're told with arrogance to put this on and don't tell people, but they're not seeking or receiving the connection they need with their parents. They're not receiving maybe the acknowledgement because and the other side is don't be so boastful around pride, but it becomes a what I call a pillar of isolation. We isolate ourselves because we are afraid to ask for help because we don't want to show people our vulnerability. Well, they think I have this or I have this position or I may have a really good job. Lots of people have great jobs, but I can't show my weakness, even though I desperately need the help.
Yeah, we hide our emotions.
So,
So therefore, we avoid help from anybody because we're absolutely hiding what's really happening within ourselves.
yeah,
Yeah, and that is the bad part of pride. We push people away because we've got to be strong.
yeah. And
You can't help me because I know what I'm doing. even though I'm crumbling inside and think, "This isn't right. I'm not doing well."
Right.
My pride doesn't allow you to help me, which is really terrible.
And
Yeah.
it's again, it put its upon us in society ways because like an act of separation for us. We don't allow ourselves to have those connections or the
Mm,
resources we really need to thrive in our own life, right? Because as human beings, we all seek connection, we all seek support and quality of depth in our relationships. We have to have the depth in ourselves and allow ourselves to be there because and especially in conversation, well, I can't talk about that because we put on this act like and it doesn't allow us to be real. It doesn't allow us to get resolve the true issues that are going on in their life. And
and if you've been through divorce, been through, breakup in relationships, 1 year later, 2 years later, 10 years later, you can say, "I should be over this now, but I'm still feeling these emotions." And pride doesn't say, "Hey, listen, help me. I need help getting over this because I should be over this by now." So pride stops you asking for help. It stops you moving forward. It stops you thinking about things in different ways because you've still got these emotions going on. It really shuts you down.
well, how many times in relationships and divorce and that people do not resolve their issues. So what caused the divorce? What I call replace, and they'll
Yeah,
find another partner. A guy will go after and trying some really attractive woman. See, look, I've got this woman's now attracted to me, and the kids are pulled into this dynamic. And so you put on a mask and be proud because I've got somebody else. So I don't need you.
yeah,
Look who I got on
yeah,
both
yep,
sides, and you go on with this replacement part of this imposter. And again, no one has connection, no one has communication, and the kids pay the biggest price because the next person comes into their life, maybe the tyrant from hell who puts on their power structure over top, and so the children are never allowed to, maybe perhaps never allowed to grieve the loss of the previous relation.
yeah,
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 and
yeah,
I've talked to adult children who had that happen, and they have horrible trauma in their lives, even 25 years later, because the next person come in, stuffed them into this box of behavior and on with their life, never allowed them to really grieve and acknowledge. So they paid a bigger price because they were still in that emotional formation years. And that
mm,
discord plays out many years in their life. So again, pride, well, I raised my children, look at them, they have good jobs and realize they're more of a mess than you are.
yeah, definitely. And because you haven't worked through it, what you do is you actually attract the same person back as the first person. Now, how often do we see this? Yes. And then so that breaks down because the first marriage broke down. So, of course, this one's going to break down too. So, then what do? They rush out and they find someone else exactly the same again. And they think they've won the lottery because they've got third person who's exactly the same as the first person because they still haven't dealt with anything.
And
And
that's
then that
why
book,
And that's why the divorce rates are like 50 some percent, 65 and 72%. And I had a divorce lawyer tell me, she said around 18 months into the second or third marriage, the reality comes in and all the flowers come off and they start to realize they're back in another pickle again.
yeah,
So because
yeah,
pride wouldn't allow them to acknowledge the pain in the first place and how they do that. So again, pride can be nice and good in many ways to be, proud in the sense of, let's put it to sense of a value of self-worth.
mm,
Maybe you've done some good things, lots of good things. Maybe you've been successful in ways, but again, that pride can also be the biggest barrier for you to really acknowledge that you need help because as the money may be there, but around your life is complete emotional dysfunction.
yeah,
And at the end of the day, when you're retired and moving on or whatever, if that's never been resolved, you're just going to carry that into your old age. And
yes,
tell me what's
yeah.
good about that pride then when you're 65 or 70 and you've got your health is gone, your relationships are gone, but you hung on to this so-called false value.
Well, that's when you shut down. You don't tell the world
Mhm.
and you don't even admit it to yourself.
Yeah.
So you internalize it and you're angry within yourself. And yeah, that's when sickness comes in. That's when all sorts of things hit you and you just don't know why.
And was it worth it for the simple sake of being being vulnerable at some point early on, you could say, I need help. I need to understand this. And what do I do? And that's what
Mm,
we do because it's not about exposing you. It's about helping you see yourself in a way that you can be more supportive, where pride and
yeah,
self worth comes from also vulnerability.
yeah. It's about taking the blinkers off
Mhm.
so you can see what's really there
And
because you can't deal with anything that you can't see.
or even allow
Mm,
yourself to see. It's allowing yourself to see that, okay, this is here, what I do. And it's not about, again, exposing, it's about working through the energy of that thing. And it's, and both what we work in is, present time, allowing the transformation to take place where in a safe space so you can be, more of you in a more peaceful, fulfilled way. And again, all these relationships start with you. And when you
yeah.
work on yourself in ways that you can be comfortable and accepting and proud of yourself in a new way, that you were vulnerable, you do, and see the energy just flow into, through your children into their relationships. And then
And often we use pride to hide the fact that we don't want to be judged by others. We don't want to be seen as the betrayed person, the hurt person, the abandoned person, the bad person. So it's our own judgment of what we think others people see
huge,
that they're not even looking at because they're too busy looking at themselves to see what you're doing anyhow.
or their phone. We think they're seeing ourselves, and we're making this up in our own distorted fantasy,
Mm,
completely distorted fantasy, and sense of, trying to be so-called strong for your children. And I will tell you this for truth, if you really are vulnerable and look at going through this to find your true self, I don't think there'd be more grateful people in your life than your children if you walked in the door in a sense of vulnerability and authenticity, that they would see you in a way that would be shocking how much they would care, because that allows them to make their transformation.
yes, yes. Because being vulnerable and showing yourself is not a weakness. It's actually a strength.
Yeah.
And we've been taught that it's a weakness. That's what we've been shown, that that's a weakness, but it's
Yep.
not. It's actually the strength,
Yep. Eh,
and the real strength is in saying, I need support. I need help.
yep.
That is real strength.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it allows someone, and it could be one of us, but someone to step into your life in ways that they said, well, that could show you more love, more care, more compassion, and allow them to facilitate in ways to connect. And again, this allows you to have such deeper connection to the people close to you, but it starts with you
Mm,
being vulnerable, being compassionate, being acceptance of yourself, and allows that connection. But again, it's the big word here is an emotion is the highest emotion you can have is authenticity,
mm.
real.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah. Yep. So where's pride helped you to survive?
Pride that I never gave up on myself. That's what I'm proud of. Like it's like my name of this
Mm,
journey. I had this, painful journey filled with anger, filled with distortion. But my my pride was that I always showed up to be my best self at work. I
mm,
didn't bring my problems to work. I brought me to work to my employers who treated me very well. And I guess in there
mm,
was gratitude because when I look at, and I really never gave up or gave in to this, that I was a seeker to have, I wanted to feel better inside. So that
mm.
pride and gratitude allowed me to, like I said, I never gave up. I wanted to be more of me and feel my own sense of love and pride for myself for this journey, because and I'm here and I'm still in this journey, but I never, ever, ever gave up.
Yes, I'm very proud of myself for the same thing. Actually, and I'm also very proud of who I've become from where I've started off from to where I am now is totally different. So I'm very proud of who I am now,
And
what I can do, how I can help others. I'm very, very grateful and very proud of what I can achieve now.
and the relationships that are flowing from that.
Yeah,
The relationship we have here online, even though like I'm in Mexico, you're in Australia, proud of ourselves for having this quality of relationship that we can be authentic and real and offer
yeah,
to work with people. And again, our commitment to that, the authenticity of ourselves, because we're very sincere. We have done this work. We have made this
yeah,
journey. So it's, we're
yeah,
proud of that, but
yeah,
not boastful, because in there is our own humility that we really allowed to see ourselves in a depth of our own despair and pain, but we had to
yeah.
see it to relieve it, to let it go.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Where where in your life has pride kept you stuck?
I think it was pride and anger. I think it was just hanging on to something, even through, like, say, even through this, my now second marriage, where I was not allowed letting. I was trying to make sure I wasn't being controlled, because I was being controlled in my first marriage. I had an alcoholic partner, and then as I married a number of years later, I did a lot of work with Andrew. Says, you're so afraid of, me controlling you, and I had to be vulnerable. To that. I said, yeah, I guess I'm being resistant, because I think I don't want to lose control. Well, again, it wasn't allowing us to develop the relationship we need to develop. So I mean, we had some serious, not harmful, but serious conversations about me letting go of just what I thought was she was trying to control, and really she was trying to help.
Yeah,
And and when
mm,
I really put my guard down and allowed, and it's so much more of how close we are, how unique we are in our receptivity of having the quality relationship that I really has been fulfilling for both of us.
yeah, it's true. Yeah. That's a very interesting point actually, Richard. And I know pride kept me stuck, as in I was married for nearly 30 years, and I was my pride kept me there that I was never going to leave,
Mhm.
and I wasn't going to recognize what was happening in my marriage, and I was certainly never going to tell anyone. So no one knew what was happening in the background. No one knew about, the verbal abuse and the sexual abuse. I certainly never shared anything. So then all of a sudden when I came out and I started speaking about what happened, because people sort of went, "Oh, we thought you were in a great place." It was like, "Oh, no, this has always been happening." And the pride of then all of a sudden you're not believed, because how can you go from being looking like the perfect couple to suddenly saying, "This is not the truth. This is why we've separated."
Yeah.
You know, that it was pride that hid the truth of what was happening for 30 years. That's a long time to hide the truth of what's happening in a marriage, because I didn't wanna be judged, you know? I didn't wanna be I didn't want people to see the truth of who I thought I was in that stage. So that certainly kept me stuck. But in saying what listening to what you have to say, I can see that if I move into another relationship, I'll have to work through the issues that you worked through.
Mhm.
I can see that. And that's one of the things about being a therapist. We can actually, we're actually open and know that we will need help to get us through that as well. And that's, we don't have the pride to hold us back from asking for help next time.
And I use the word, everything has requires real world application, because we do the work and all the stuff. But when we really step into a relationship with an open mind and open heart, as we being, looking at our own vulnerability, because it's a
Mm,
new space. Well, I can say, I put this all down. It should be just flow into it, but there's going to be dynamics. There's going to be contention points, but having the ability to discuss that and navigate and be vulnerable with each other, because and be supportive,
yes.
where it's not, ugly, harmful conversations. It can be hard at the time, but it's also being vulnerable, your emotion, and
Yeah.
allowing yourself to stay in the conversation, that you can walk each other through this together, and it may be tense for a day or so, but when you really come out of that dip, you're like, you just, again, you have a strong relationship, you have more supportive, and again, I went through that with my wife Angela. We had some tough times in a sense of discussion, but they weren't painful. They weren't ventful or harmful in the sense of words. It was just to have this vulnerability.
And they were honest too.
They were honest.
They were honest.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of our relationships have never been honest.
There's so much my first marriage, things I couldn't even talk about. You just learn to shut them off.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I was the most dishonest person in that way. I
Yeah,
never lied to
yeah,
him, but at the same time, I was dishonest about who I was.
yeah, yeah.
Very dishonest about who I was.
Every night you went to bed with a stranger. You
Yeah, yeah, me.
Yeah,
I was my own stranger.
yeah.
But then when I look back at it, in that relationship, if I had have gone to bed being who I was, that would have threatened him, which would have put a whole other genre of dynamics in the relationship, which would have imploded it or exploded it, whichever way.
Well, or it would have been exploited, as narcissists do. You would have been exploited and
Yeah,
used against you.
absolutely, absolutely.
Mhm,
So that was the protection of my pride, probably,
mhm.
not being honest about who I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting topic. Is there anything else you wanna say about pride?
I think just recognizing in your life, where is pride not allowing me to really see my limitations, and where I could receive help, and help
Mm,
from a quality person, help from a friend, help from Lorraine or I, that allowing you to move in your life in a direction that's more fulfilling and more heartfelt for you.
mm,
Look at that, write them down, make note of something. Am I being pride? Am I being stubborn? Could I use help?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm very big on journaling, so
Mhm.
anyone who's listening to this and it's resonating with them, I really do want you to ask yourself and actually really do some journal notes on, where has pride helped you to survive and where has it kept you stuck? So ask those 2 questions and journal on it, and who would you be if you didn't have to prove anything to anyone else as well? You know, that's another fantastic journal prompt that is well and truly worth asking and journaling on.
And who are you willing to become?
Oh, yes. And who are you willing to become?
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for listening today. We'll be back next week or at some other time.